If you love to travel, you are going to need a travel agent. And if you want the best travel agent, you are going to need Boull's Travel. Boull's Travel can help you with any kind of holiday wherever you want to go in the world, taking care of every last detail. From package holidays through to fully customised itineraries where you are completely in control of where you go and what you do. And the best part, there are no charges whatsoever. Rated excellent on Trustpilot. Start your next adventure right now by going to boullystravel.com. Hello and welcome to the Jason Boull Travel Podcast. And we're joined here today with Della Tully from Tourism Yukon. Hello, Della.
Hello, Jason. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Awesome, fantastic. Thanks for joining us today. This is part of our Canadian mini-series where we're homing in on different areas around Canada to bring a lot more detail and depth than we usually find anywhere else. And Della has done some other podcasts with us as well, and she's an absolute mine of information, so it's great to have her on here. So Della, just to kind of refresh everybody, can you just tell them kind of what your role involves at Tourism Yukon?
Yes, of course. We've had the account for well over 10 years now. So we've represented the Yukon in the UK for a fairly long time. I'm lucky enough to go out on a yearly basis, sometimes twice a year. It depends on what's happening, really. And my job really is to speak, if you like, to both consumers and trade in terms of the destination, because obviously it's often a name that people don't know. They might know the name, but they don't really know where the Yukon is. It's a lesser known destination in Canada, and it's really my job to educate people on why to go to the Yukon. And that involves training travel agents and taking travel agents and tour operators out to the Yukon, as well as going to consumer shows and speaking directly to the consumer and answering any inquiries that come to me that way as well.
So from somebody who's never heard about Yukon and couldn't really point to it on a map, really, how to describe it to people?
Our tagline is actually larger than life, and that's pretty good, to be honest, because we are really about the size of Spain with only about 48,000 people in it. So we're quite a remote destination. We're 80% wilderness. But if you look for where we are on a map, we're actually less remote, if you like, than what a lot of people perceive us to be. We actually border Alaska. So if you head west, you're in Alaska. If you head east, you're in Northwest Territories. And then if you head south, you're in British Columbia. So a lot of people will come to us like via Vancouver or via another gateway up to the Yukon. But we also get a lot of cruise traffic as well. People coming in by cruise to Alaska and then coming up to us that way.
Okay, awesome. So what makes Yukon different then from the rest of Canada? How does it really stand out?
I think Canada in general, everybody knows about the outdoor recreation opportunities. And I think that's one of the big appeals of Canada. It's very hospitable and very friendly, same language, so you don't have to worry about that. I think the difference with the Yukon is it's the amazing scenery that you expect to see in Canada, because let's face it, that's what a lot of people that will be top of their list as a reason to go to Canada. But it's without the crowds. You don't have to be lining up to take that iconic picture, if you like. And I've done other parts of Canada. I've been to Lake Louise, Banff, Jasper, places like that, which are spectacular, and nothing to take away from any of those other Canadian provinces or destinations. But I've been there where you're rushing because you can see this motor coach coming up and you're going to have to quickly take that picture and go on. And you never have that in the Yukon. You really do have so much to yourself, if you like, on a holiday there.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because I think so much of Europe has become over touristy. I don't think it's over touristy. I just think the intensity of where people are in certain zones can be really quite extreme. And there's lots of destinations around Europe that have been affected by it. And numbers of people there at any one time are really quite high. But when you're trying to get that photo, that magical shot or something, that experience I want to have, it can be really hard to do it. I remember I was out in Barcelona recently, and we were up in one of the Gaudi estates and trying to get some photos, and it was just a queue of people and everyone's impatient. Everybody wants to get there. You haven't got 2 minutes to really take a photo and you push back out the way again. So Yeah, having that nice open space and no crowds are really appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a USP for the Yukon. You don't have traffic jams, congestion. Like I say, a million people queuing up to take that picture that you want to take. We jokingly always say we have rush minutes in the Yukon, and that is true. And when my Canadian boss said that to me one day, I was like laughing, thinking he's joking. But honestly, about 5 o'clock on a weekday, you get this little flurry in Whitehorse, which is obviously our capital city, and then it's all gone again. You're never going to be there waiting a long time for. I've never been in a traffic jam in 10 years over there.
Fantastic. So can you paint a picture for us then of these must-see landscapes and natural wonders that people can expect to see?
Yeah, we have two UNESCO heritage sites. One of them is Kluane National Park. Kluane is home to the tallest peaks in Canada, the tallest mountain, Mount Logan, and it's one of the largest protected land masses in the world. So if you've got experience of other national parks in North America, where you drive up, you get a little ranger station, there's a little kind of cubby, if you like, and a person comes out and you pay your fee and you drive on in. It's not like any national park like that. You don't drive into it. There's no accommodation in it. It's absolutely vast. You can hike into it. You can heli hike, do all those kind of things. A lot of people do flight seeing, but that's one of our big natural wonders really within the Yukon. And then we also have a relatively new other UNESCO heritage site which takes in Dawson City. And if your visitors to the podcast know about Race Across Canada, that amazing TV series, Dawson City featured quite a bit in that. They kept going back to it in other series, and it's where that last big gold rush of North America was. So Dawson City is now part of a huge protected area that is not just Dawson City, which is home to that gold rush. And gold mining is still our number one industry, by the way. That's not something that just happened in the late 1800s and went away. It is our number one industry now. You can still pan for gold and do all of that. You can buy jewelry made out of local gold. But yeah, Dawson City is a very special place. And whenever I take people, they say, wow, it's like a Universal Studios set. It doesn't look real. It's these clapboard houses, all colourful, nothing can be changed. It's like a frontier town. It's like an old Western movie, if you want, really. Yeah, that's just two of so many different places in the Yukon. And we have the only road that crosses the Arctic Circle in Canada. So the Dempster Highway, if you remember the Ice Road Trucker series, some people remember that.
Yeah.
That is the road that they took, and it goes over the Arctic Circle, and it's the only one that does that in Canada.
Oh, wow. There's a few things I want to pick up on what we were just saying there, which was firstly the heli hikes. Tell us a bit about the heli hikes.
Heli hikes is really where a helicopter picks you up and takes you to somewhere that you wouldn't normally be able to access. And that happens in not just in Kluane, in other parts as well. Tombstone Territorial Park is another area, which is actually up that Dempster Highway that you can do heli hiking. And it's just a way of literally being taken to a part that, unless you're someone that's going to go off into the wilderness for weeks on end, which, let's face it, most UK travellers are probably not going to do that, it lifts you to somewhere that you would never normally access. It drops you off, you'll have a guide, you'll go hiking with them, and then they'll come back and pick you up. But the whole experience is a bucket list. It's just something to be able to see the vastness of the landscape from the air to begin with, and then to actually land somewhere that you would never really get to. You feel like you're one of those kind of explorers on Everest or something.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Sounds absolutely awesome. Another thing was you said about Dawson City as well. Is that over by Dawson's Creek, like the old TV?
Yeah, they found gold in Dawson Creek, and the cry went out basically around the world. And over the course of 3 years, it was found in 1898, and over a 3-year period, then 100,000 people stampeded to Dawson City. And the new UNESCO site really tells the story from both sides as well, because obviously for First Nations people, this was not good news for them. They were driven out of a lot of their homelands. So it's a two-pronged story. We always see this kind of gold rush as this amazing opportunity, this amazing thing that happened throughout history, not obviously just in Canada, in other places as well. But it's a totally different story for people that were already living there. Dawson City is just such a special place because it is just It's frozen in time, really. It's a beautiful location, and yeah, it's one of those places that whenever I take anyone, they always say, "Wow, this just doesn't even look real." So I think it's a jewel in the crown for the Yukon for sure.
Yeah, so I bet there's a lot of clear skies up there as well, isn't there? A lot of
Yeah,
kind of no light
absolutely.
pollution, which would be great for other experiences like Northern Lights and things.
Yeah, and that's something that we have. Our Northern Lights is pretty special because we have aurora viewing. We have the longest aurora viewing. And that means it starts mid-August when we actually start going into the fall, into autumn, mid-August. By the third week of August, we're in fall then. And that means you get those clearer skies at night. It gets darker earlier, and it's just perfect conditions for aurora viewing in the Yukon. And we have this solar max actually that's happening at the moment, which means we're at the peak of an 11-year cycle. And we're known for our aurora viewing anyway, but from now through 2026, this solar max means that there's more solar activity, more solar storms, which is what makes for the better aurora viewing. But you can literally see aurora from August right the way through to April in the Yukon. It's not just something that people can only see in the depths of winter. Because some people have got it on their bucket list and they say, I'd love to see the aurora. And let's face it, we've seen more aurora here in the UK in recent times than we've ever done before. So people, I think, are a bit more in tune with it. And wow, I'd really like to see this properly. But I don't want to go somewhere when it's -20 or -30. Not everybody is up for that kind of winter experience. So I always say to people, go in the fall. If you've got that on your checklist, you're still going to be in a t-shirt during the day. You'll need a fleece maybe in the morning and the evenings, but you've got the opportunity to see the potential to see the aurora then, even though it's not wintertime.
Yeah, I bet it's also good then for stargazing and those types of activities.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were right, really, what you said at the beginning about lack of light pollution, because we have such a small population compared to the landmass that we have in the Yukon, that it's so easy to get away from any light pollution. Within 10 minutes of Whitehorse, you drive out of Whitehorse or you take an aurora viewing tour, you're in wilderness within 10 minutes, literally. So the things that people need to avoid to have good aurora viewing, and one of them is obviously light pollution, and that's why we're so great for that. We also have a semi-arid climate, which means it's very dry, and you need that because the less cloud the better. Obviously you need those clear skies for the aurora.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's kind of the wildlife that you're going to encounter over there when you get out into the wilderness?
All sorts, really. Obviously, bears are mainly hibernating in the winter, so you're not going to see the bears. But in the wintertime, you can still see like moose, Arctic foxes, things like that. In the summer, obviously, if you're really into viewing wildlife, then I would say go in the summer. And by that, really the beginning of June or end of May through to mid-August. That's our summer. And like I said earlier, we then start going into autumn fairly early, as in by the third week of August through to mid-September, we're then in the autumn. So if you're really trying to see bears, I would always say the best time is when they're coming out of hibernation, which is through May and early June. They've come out, they're foraging for food. The same really when they're going back into hibernation. So whenever I normally take a trip, it's quite often that first or second week of September, and you'll see them by the side of the road quite often. For grizzly bears, it's Kluane National Park is the better area for grizzlies. In the summer, you've got moose, obviously caribou, all kinds of different wildlife to see. And that's a big draw for people going to the Yukon.
Yeah, absolutely. Were there any kind of lesser known experiences, any kind of remote places to stay, any Indigenous led tours? What else have we got on there that people aren't going to find about otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, we have a number of First Nations. So I would say the best thing if you want to interact with the Indigenous culture, I would definitely take in a cultural centre. And a cultural centre, really, just to make that clear, is a museum / visitor centre, really. And most communities will have that. So wherever you go in the Yukon, any sizable town, one of my favourites is actually at Haines Junction, which is just outside of Kluane National Park. And that has like an amazing visitor centre, cultural centre, which has a movie which tells you all about the history. And then there's other things like there's a place called Long Ago People's Place, and that's run by a First Nations couple, a man and wife. And it really does educate any visitor on how tribes have really evolved during the centuries, the millennia, if you like, how people have survived, how people have built homes, hunted, and you sit down and you have bannock tea, sorry, nettle tea and bannock bread, and it's just an amazing experience to actually talk to two First Nations people that have opened up this whole attraction is a bit of a wrong word for it, but it really does show how people have lived through the ages as First Nations in the Yukon.
Yeah, I think over recent times there's been a real kind of change in people's understanding, which is where the education piece really comes into it, but also people being aware how they have been affected and how to better live in the same areas with each other and get along without the age-old problems over land battles that they've kind of had. And that education piece is really vital to that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all want to be a more respectful traveller, don't we? And you can go to, there's an amazing man called Keith Smarch, and he teaches First Nations languages in the schools, and he's First Nations, and he has a totem pole carving state facility his whole family are involved in, and these totem poles go like around the world. It's a totem pole carving studio, and it's in a little town called Carcross south of Whitehorse. And when I first went there, he had things hanging up that he'd like recently caught hunting, and as a Westerner you're a bit like, ooh, but you learn so much from talking to somebody like him. And the whole thing about hunting and trapping and things, which of course is so alien to most of us, it makes much more sense when you see that environment and how people have survived and want to keep their traditions and that whole way of life alive. So I think it's really important that you understand both sides of the story sometimes.
So moving on to types of travellers, who is Yukon perfect for?
Quite often, although we'd love to be the first time visitor to Canada, in reality, most people have probably already been to Canada, or they may have been somewhere as adventurous or outdoorsy as Canada. And they may have seen us. And like I said, we got a lot of attention after Race Across Canada, that TV series. So the Yukon is perfect, really, for someone that wants the outdoors, has potentially probably been to Canada, may have already done the Rockies. They might have gone and done your standard BC, Alberta, cross-province trip where they've gone to see the Rockies, gone to see wildlife, and then said, wow, I absolutely loved that, but I maybe want something a little bit more remote or away from the crowds. They might have gone in the middle of the summer and it's been really busy in those places. They look at where we are. We equally get people that see Alaska on the map and say, oh, wow, that's where the Yukon is. It borders Alaska. Why don't we do a cruise and then forage a little bit more into the Yukon, which is its neighbour? So it's quite often someone that's perhaps seen up where we are, but doesn't really know that much about us, and then does a bit more research into what the Yukon is about.
So we've talked about adventure seekers and hikers and those activity-based people. Now, how about kind of families and those types of things? Is there stuff in Yukon for families?
Yeah, I would say that sometimes we don't get people with very young families traveling to the Yukon. And I think that's because, first of all, there's no non-stop flight to Whitehorse. We'd love it if there was from the UK, but there isn't. So, straight away, if you've got toddlers, for example, you've got a 10-hour flight to, say, Vancouver, for an example. You don't have to come via Vancouver, but a lot of our traffic does. You've got a Vancouver flight, then you're going to go clear customs, etc., and fly on to the Yukon, which is another 2 hours, 15 minutes sort of thing. We tend to be people with older children, and we haven't got a lot of man-made attractions, if I'm absolutely honest. It's all about the outdoors. I've taken my kids, they were adults at the time, but I would have taken them younger. It didn't really, the opportunity didn't present itself at the time when my kids were teenagers, but I would certainly have taken them, I would say age 8, 10 and above. You'd be fine to take kids. It's just that obviously some of the driving distances, depending on the type of itinerary you have, but they can be quite long. If you've got small kids, they might be less keen on doing that kind of thing. Also, just an important thing that not everywhere has Wi-Fi signal. So if you've got, even my adult kids, when I told them, just be aware that sometimes when we're out on the road, once you leave a community or a town, you won't have Wi-Fi. They were like, really? They just didn't really, we're so connected here, obviously, in the UK, that it's very unusual for us to go somewhere, isn't it? Let's face it, where we might be a few hours without any kind of signal. But that
Yeah.
is the case in the Yukon. So if you have people that, you know, that have to be connected constantly, a lot of people say to me, I love it because I can say to my boss, you're not going to get hold of me. That kind of thing. It's not everyone's cup of tea. Sometimes you need to be in constant contact with someone. Then I totally understand that.
Yeah, I'd say for families, it's perfect because you just need more excuses to get kids off
Yeah,
tech these days. Yeah,
absolutely.
it's something we've battled with a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That is the end of part 1. Make sure you are subscribed so you are joining us for part 2.